25 Policy and Government Relations Committee meeting of the School District of Waukesha Board of Education. I call the meeting to order. We'll start with verification of meeting posting. Julie, can you please verify that the meeting has been properly posted?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Next would be opportunity for citizens to speak. I understand we do not have any speakers tonight, is that correct? Okay, thank you very much. All right, so that takes us into our first action item of the meeting, which would be the approval of minutes from the May 12th, 2025 Policy and Government Relations meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Motion by Mrs. Voigt.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Brooks. Any discussion? All right, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of approving the May 12th minutes, say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, passes 5-0. All right, our next agenda item under policy discussion and information is a discussion of technical corrections to policy 5460, graduation requirements. Dr. Siebert?
All right, thank you, Mr. Wad. Good evening, everyone. So we do have two technical corrections this evening, and the first, as Mr. Wad stated, is to 5460 graduation requirements. You may recall that we already made one to this policy when we went to this new boxing system of what applies to groups before the class of 28 and then beyond the class of 2028, and we had to add it to a page. Now what we noticed is that the third paragraph that we're striking is because it's already under English in the actual boxes. So nothing changed with the wording of the policy, just doesn't need to be doubled up. And then, may I, Mr. Wad, just continue with the next one?
Yes, please do.
Okay. The next one is policy 3140, non-renewal, resignation, and termination. And let me just get to it. So there is a section under statutory administrators on the second page, and it's referring specifically to the non-renewal or termination of the superintendent. So rather than have the line in there that talks about working with legal counsel, all of that is described within policy 1241, non-renewal or termination of the superintendent's contract applies. So that it's referencing what Neola often has been doing that we've noticed is adding the policy and the title, the number and the title into the actual policy for cross-referencing, which is something we've done as well. Mrs. Boyd.
The only thing I'm seeing that we might need to do is to add reference, Collins, or some word, some verb, to go, if we're getting rid of the second half of that sentence. And what we want to do is to reference policy 1241 for those details.
So let me see if this helps, Mrs. Boyd. So the second sentence starts with, in the case of the superintendent's contract, comma, and then it's all crossed out.
Right.
Policy 1241, non-renewal or termination of the superintendent's contract applies. Yeah, so it's just like the verb at the end. Yeah, I thought the same thing when I looked at it.
Okay.
But, yeah, no, thank you for bringing it up.
All right, thank you, Dr. Siebert. Anyone else with any comments, questions, concerns about the technical corrections? All right. Proceeding on then to the next item, we have no policy discussion or action items for this evening. So we'll move into the government relations discussion and information items, starting with an update on the 2025-2027 state budget. Dr. Siebert?
All right, thank you, Mr. Wad. So many of you have maybe heard this. The most recent news on the state budget front is that negotiations between the state Republicans and the governor have broken down. Both of them seem to talk about it being negotiating in good faith, but just different expectations, I think, in terms of spending is what I've been reading and what both sides would like to see, which is not uncommon. The Joint Finance Committee continues to meet. Actually, their next meeting is Thursday at 1 p.m. So they'll continue to work on the budget. I did hear Robin Voss say that he's highly optimistic that something can be reached by the 4th of July. So time will tell, obviously. Or it's possible that a state budget doesn't get passed, under which case we just continue to work under the current 23-25 state budget. So there's still quite a bit of time, and I think, just have to kind of sit back and watch now and see what happens over the summer. But if anybody else has insights that you're hearing, I'd welcome those as well, but that's about as much as I have to tell you.
Anyone have any questions or comments? Mr. Brooks?
Yeah, I would just add, so this Thursday, as Dr. Siebert mentioned, the Finance Committee will be meeting, and typically what they do is they'll, we have so many different agencies and sub-agencies in the state of Wisconsin, so, typically they'll go through a couple agencies at a time, take up their budget, and this Thursday, they're actually taking up DPI's budget, which is obviously directly related to what we do here, so we'll have ideally a little bit more of an idea of what that's going to look like by Thursday.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks.
Anyone else? All right, thank you for the update, Dr. Siebert. The next item under our discussion items for government relations is an update on DPI report cards.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Watt. I'm going to kick this off, and we have the great fortune of having Deputy Superintendent Gunnerman with us here this evening. The Department of Public Instruction has assembled a team of 32 educational leaders for the summer that are going to look at what they're terming performance rating thresholds for school and district report cards. I thought having Ms. Gunnerman join us tonight to discuss what that may mean, as well as provide some context on the history of report cards in Wisconsin. She's exceptionally well versed in this area from her various experiences in leadership, and it's my privilege and pleasure to turn it over to her.
Well, thank you. So I have been working with the school report cards since they came out, and so what I'll share tonight is what Dr. Siebert mentioned is just the information that was shared with us. Beyond this news release and that initial communication, we haven't received any additional information, so I don't have any secret insider information to share. But what I can do is share with you some of the resources and some of the work that we've been doing around understanding report cards previous to all of this. So first and foremost, this is the release that DPI had put out. This is just a screenshot. You can access this on the DPI webpage. But as you can see, it does allude to the leaders that will review and update the performance rating thresholds. Those are some key words that I want to come back to. So what I brought here is a handout, and Julie can pass this out. It's linked here in the presentation. We'll put the presentation up in board docs after our meeting. But this is one of the resources that is being shared. It's called Understanding the 2025 Wisconsin Report Card Standard Setting, What's Changing and Why It Matters. So I'm going to break down some of this information in this presentation, and then I'm going to give you some additional information. So in the handout, there's a top paragraph that just provides an overview of the school and district report cards, just saying how we've had those in place since 2011-12 school year, and that they're recommending that they undergo significant updates, making a more formal standard setting process essential to maintain a valid accountability system. Also in the handout, they talk about what exactly a school report card is. I won't spend much detail on that, but if you'd like to sit for like an hour or two after and talk about report cards, I am your girl. But there's an overview. As you know, we get an accountability rating. Overall, they have certain areas that they look at. We as a district analyze that, use that as part of our continuous improvement process with any other data that we get. So then we get into why updates are being made, and I have this in the presentation here, just capturing their bullets that are being shared with us. So they're noting that since the report cards were launched nearly 15 years ago, both state law and measures have evolved. There have been notable updates that include a greater emphasis on growth for schools, adoption of the value add methodology, And then also replacement of closing gaps priority area to target groups. So these bullet points here on the left of the slide deck and on the right of your sheet are things that have happened over time with the report cards since they've started nearly 15 years ago. So these are speaking to why they would like to have these updates made. And I think one thing I want to point out is their terms of standard setting. So in the school report card area in my work thus far, this has been a term that we haven't used. We've talked about thresholds and overall accountability ratings being revised, but we haven't used the term standard setting. So they provide information on this handout of what is a standard setting. So standard setting is a typical and essential part of maintaining valid accountability systems. This structured process is used to determine or update score thresholds that define performance levels. So those are some key terms. So just like in the very beginning, they underline those performance levels and rating thresholds. And again, they're referencing those thresholds and defining those performance levels. I'm going to jump back and forth, but so when it comes to those performance levels, what we know as an educator that we've been using is those report card ratings. So what I have here is the overall report card rating when it was changed in 2021 school year. And so that's when, prior to the 2021 school and district report cards, there were different rating or category minimal expectations and maximum. So you can see that in 2018-19, the school accountability report cards, in order to meet expectations, you had to have a minimal score of 63 and a maximum score of 72.9. Then we had COVID, and then we didn't have report cards after COVID. And then coming back, our report card ratings were adjusted. These are the cut scores that were adjusted. So meets expectation was adjusted that the minimal score range was 58 and the highest maximum score range for meets expectation was 69. So when this did happen, we had lots of shifts of how schools and districts were performing throughout the state. So for me, while they're referencing standard setting, I don't have any more information than the words here. But when they are talking about standard setting, referencing the thresholds and defining the performance levels, those are the performance levels on the report card. If they go into the areas of growth and everything else, and that's a whole nother subject. But I just wanted to bring forward that this is what they are sharing, that what is standard setting. And what I can share too, in my understanding of information so far, what's being done is that term standard setting, that process was just used with the forward exam on improvements made. And so you will see, we shared last year that our cut scores and performance levels and proficiency ranges for the forward exam were revised. So now that we've seen the terms standard setting in the area of the forward exam, and now we're seeing them around the Wisconsin forward or the Wisconsin accountability report cards, they're using that same process, and ultimately they're sharing that updates will be made on the threshold and the definition of the performance levels. So from my experience, I'm making the connection that likely we'll be looking at that overall accountability rating being adjusted. What we do in Waukesha, what we've been doing the last few years is anytime any accountability report card comes out, we bring this information forward to teaching and learning committee meeting. This is just a screenshot of the last time we came forward. And what this really summarizes is the changes that have been made just in the last 3 years. If I went back in my presentations, I would be able to show you the changes that are made in that have been made in every year. Not always are they looking at the accountability rating categories, but there is always some change, typically with the report cards. So here, this highlights in 2021, there was an overall visual change. That's where it really changed the whole landscape of a report card. There was a statement about caution about after the COVID pandemic. Districts were provided an opportunity to provide a narrative at the top. We changed the closing gaps target area, or closing gaps area, to the target group outcomes, and the overall accountability ratings were revised. So with any changes that come from DPI with the accountability report card, we will bring those changes forward to the Teaching and Learning Committee along with our results. For right now, what I can share with you is the information from DPI and just how I'm looking at that language when we look at those standard setting and performance level anticipation changes. So what I wanted to also share is what DPI has shared is about what's coming up next. So here they highlight that they're working with educational leaders and stakeholders from around Wisconsin to help update the rating system. To my knowledge, myself or our district assessment coordinator, we are not participating in that. Not saying that we wouldn't jump on that opportunity. We haven't been shared any opportunity that is available to be a part of that. They're also saying that this collaborative work will ensure that the next generation of school ratings remains fair, transparent, and aligned with the way that performance is actually being measured. And that part of their next steps includes the first standard setting meeting that will take place virtually in June, followed by an in-person meeting in August. And then that the final bullet being that these update thresholds will be implemented for the 24-25 school year. So these report cards are typically shared in October or November. So we would plan, based on that timeline, if everything holds true, we would plan to have an update on the information as well as changes and what our results are in an upcoming Teaching and Learning Committee meeting. That's really what I have to share in report cards. I'm happy to entertain a conversation about anything here. And like I said, if you want to go in details more about like our specific detailed result, I'm happy to do that at another time as well.
Thank you, Ms. Gunnerman. Mrs. White?
Just for clarification, the tests that, that have just been taken in the last school year are the ones that this is going to be based on. So they have the data in their hands as they make a decision on where the cuts are going to be for the revisions of it?
The most recent school year's data would be factored into the overall report card results. That being said, multiple components of the report card factor in more than 1 year's of results. And oftentimes, the most recent year is given more weight. So we have yet to understand what that would look like, even more complicated by the change in rating scores with the Wisconsin Forward. So yes, DRC, the test portal for Wisconsin Forward, has released individual student results, and that should help DPI to get the results and use that. But in their calculations for different areas of the report card, they often use more than 1 year of data.
Other comments, questions? Mr. Brooks?
Thanks. So I know you mentioned that you or some of the other administrative level staff haven't been asked to be a part of this. Do we know if any teachers have? I know in the last round when they kind of looked at changing the terminology and changing some of the cut scores, there were a couple of Waukesha educators who were part of that. And I guess I wasn't sure from their description of what this panel or what this group of people was going to look like, when they say education leaders, does that mean administrators? Does that mean curriculum people? Does that mean teachers, or kind of a combination of all of them?
I can take that, Ms. Genderman. So, good question, Mr. Brooks. I actually reached out to the DPI to ask, and I got a list of who's on it. There's 32 people. There are no School District of Waukesha individuals, and this time it seems like it's more curriculum directors. There's some superintendents, principals. It seems like more leadership roles, I would
Gotcha.
say.
Thank you.
You bet.
Other comments? All right, I have a couple of things I'd like to inquire about. So first of all, my opinion on the last batch of report cards that were issued, I made quite clear at the board meeting, and I have lost faith in their ability to provide us with, or at least the public, with a good picture of where any individual school is at. And I just want to clarify. So the changes that we saw with the report cards that came out this past year were more in the way that they arrived at the score, right? The weighting of different factors. They didn't change the thresholds in this last year, right? It was how they arrived at a particular score for a particular school or district. Is that correct?
No, the forward exam, which is the test that's given to 3rd through 8th grade and 10th grade social studies for literacy and math, those thresholds on the test itself were changed. And so in order to be meets or proficient, it used to be called proficient, now it's meets expectation, those were adjusted, which then was factored into the report card. So we had different standard of cut scores through the multiple years of data that was used. But with that being the most recent data, it's weighted the most.
But wasn't there also a change in how they weighted actual objective scores versus, that's maybe a poor choice of words.
In the
The actual raw scores versus, measurements of growth and in those scores at various demographic cuts. Is that right, or am I?
I'm not sure if we're speaking the same language. I don't believe any other cut scores were changed.
Right, so I remember our discussion being that one of the reasons why we saw a MPS middle school that had objectively lower scores, right, in their forward scores, actually got a meets expectation than one of our middle schools. And that was because more weight was placed on their
Priority
growth
areas.
metrics than they were the actual scores of the students.
Yes, that refers to the priority areas. So each report card has 4 priority areas. Based on the demographic of students, there's more weight in different priority areas. So if you have more students that are low SES, you have higher weight for growth. And that's what you're saying, those priority areas. So MPS may have had growth factored way more than we may have had for some of our schools or our district. But that's how every district and school report card is very individual.
Right.
Based on those percentages of the population.
Right. So, and that was something that we struggled with because it was hard for us to do a year-over-year comparison because of the changing weights along those various measurements. Now, am I understanding that now what they're looking at is setting new standards for the cut scores? Or is that what you're at least assuming based on the language?
I'm making the assumption that there are terms, standard setting process that will result in a different, let me just go back to it. Update the performance rating thresholds. So on the state's school and district report cards. So I'm making the connection to the performance rating thresholds to be the accountability rating categories. We don't have any, for the report card, we don't, unless they take out one test or this or that, like Forward did, and make changes. But for us, we're looking at that, I'm thinking it's the accountability rating. If someone knows something else, please let me know. But all we have is this communication that we're going off of, and so we're anxious to learn more, and whatever it is, we'll share that, when we
Right.
know. But we are just making some connections because we don't have a lot of information.
Right, okay, so I guess trying to bring all this together, are you or are other leaders within our district concerned that this change will once again make it even more difficult for us to do an evaluation of where we are or are not making progress according to the state report cards because the goalposts are going to be moving once again? Is that a concern that you have?
Absolutely, and that's where I point out, this slide is actually from a different presentation where I always lead any conversation around report cards by going over and summarizing the changes.
So I'm going to ask you for a speculation you may not be wanting to make, which is fine if you don't want to, but I'm going to ask anyway. What is the motivation this time? I have my theories about the last motivation for the changes that we saw last year. What seems to be driving yet another change to these report cards, which continue to make them more and more difficult, at least for our district, to be able to to provide any real value to our community members in terms of what it says about what our district is or isn't doing well?
I don't know for sure, but I would say if it is around the accountability rating categories and the minimal and maximum scores, my guess is that meeting expectations, the expectation will go lower. And so then more people would be meeting expectation. That's similar to the change that we saw earlier with accountability rating categories. Again, I don't know anything more.
Right.
That would be just my assumption.
Well, I will just say that I share your concerns, that that's what we're seeing as a continuing lowering of standards and expectations, which make it increasingly difficult for school districts like ours to have any meaningful information come out of those report cards. And I appreciate your candor in answering that because I know that's a difficult spot to put you in, but I continue to be extremely frustrated with DPI and their constant tampering with what could be very valuable data and information for us and our community, but they continue to tamper with it to a point where it becomes meaningless year over year. So, thank you. Yes, Mr. Zenobia.
Thank you. So a couple, I guess, would be clarifying questions, if you could maybe put a little bit of an explanation on them. So as part of one of their updates, they're replacing the term closing gaps as a priority with targeting group outcomes. Can you elaborate on that? To me,
That already happened. So here they're saying why our updates are being made. It says since report cards were launched nearly 15 years ago, both state law and measures have evolved. Notable updates include, so as I read these, it says replacement of closing gaps priority area with target groups. I reported that out in 2021, that was a change. So I think they're here summarizing adjustments that they've already made.
okay.
The value add model for growth, that was very early on in the report cards where they do take the value add growth model and apply that. I think the initial report cards did not have that. And they just looked at growth from one year to the next year. And the value add calculation factors in looking at students, how they are how all other students at that grade level grew, and if there's value add and students grew more than the typical growth or not. We didn't always have that. So to me, as I read these are things I've already reported out that have already changed on the report cards.
Okay. Under the standard setting, it talks about, during the process, a panel of educators and experts will make informed judgments and recommendations. Is that the same group, the 32? Is that, they're going to continue doing that?
That's the group, yes.
Is this like a one-time thing, or is this throughout the year? How does that work? Do we know?
I think it's captured here in what's next, where they're going to have an online meeting in June. They're going to meet in person in August. And review and discussion, and these updated thresholds will be implemented for the 24-25 school year. So I think this is
I
a
think it's-
short commitment for
It's a
this
summer
group.
commitment, yeah.
Okay. And is that list that you mentioned you have, is that linked on the website somewhere? Do you know, or?
No, I asked for it and they sent me it, but I'm happy to share it with
Yeah,
everyone.
if you would, please, that would
Yeah,
be
certainly.
interesting. Thank you.
Mrs. White?
Do we have any idea about the other states that are using this approach to ensure accountability systems? It makes it sound like, we're not alone, this is something that's happening elsewhere. We seem pretty miffed by what's happening. Is that true in other states as well?
I think every state is different. I don't know. I don't want to make any connections beyond us.
I don't know, we could do some research into that, Mrs. Voigt, but off the top of my head, I don't know what states they might be referencing.
Mr. Brooks?
Thank you. So it mentions here that the first standard setting meeting will take place virtually in June of '25, then there'll be an in-person one. Do we know, are those going to be publicly accessible at all?
I don't know. We'd have to research that on their website.
I'd be curious because the bullet point before that says that the collaborative work will ensure that the next generation of school ratings remains fair, transparent, and aligned with the way that performance is actually being measured. And I know the last time they did this, they kind of did it in closed door meetings and made people sign non-disclosure agreements and wouldn't respond to records requests. So it doesn't seem particularly transparent to me, but hopefully this time they allow the public to actually see what's going on with this, just given the discussion and debate about school report cards through the last few months.
So just to kind of dovetail on what Mr. Brooks was talking about, one of the first things I circled in this was the word fair. They want school ratings to remain fair. I would argue they are not fair today, and I think I was able to establish that fairly easily a couple months ago when we talked about it in the committee meeting. Do they offer definitions of these terms? So to Mr. Brooks's point, at least the last time, there was nothing transparent about that process. Do they define how they're going to be transparent? Do they define what they mean by fair? And some of these are rhetorical questions, I understand. But I'm making a point here that DPI is using language that I don't think they really either mean or understand. And I just want it on the record that at least as the committee chair of the Policy and Government Relations Committee on this school board, I'm offended that we're going through this again. I'm offended that we don't have any participation in this process and apparently have no voice in who sits on that committee. I have no idea who makes those decisions. And yet we're supposed to live with these report cards and the impact that they have both on our district and our community members when they issue them. Any other comments or questions, editorial comments? All right. Dr. Siebert, you did say you have the list of the people and the districts that they are represent?
I do,
That you can
yes.
share
I'll be
with us?
happy to share it.
That would be great.
And regardless of whatever the next steps are for this small team or not, what typically happens when a report card is released with the, whatever changes, because having changes is nothing new for us.
Right.
But we work with our CISA organization to go through them, and then Jamie Hensel is doing that now. Her and I will prep our principal team to better understand the changes, and then we will bring the information here and share it in a very similar slide deck like I had shot here of like going through what are the changes, what do these results mean, where do all of our schools fit, and at the same time we do a communication plan with Mary Jo King to include communication to all families for district performance and school performances.
And I want to be clear, Ms. Gunderman, I know that there is data that you are able to extract from those report cards and that do help you in some of your assessments. It's just not obvious in the report cards themselves that DPI publishes to the layman or the parent or the taxpayer in our community to look at and be able to make heads or tails of it. So I know that you and your team will extract from that the data which is valuable to us and use it effectively. I certainly hope you understand that I trust in that. It's the public-facing piece that I struggle with. All right, any other comments, questions? Thank you, Ms. Gunderman, for coming and talking to us about this and sharing what you do know about the changes and your transparency about those things which are a mystery to you and probably the other hundreds of districts in the state who are wondering why they have to put us through this again. Anything else in this topic? All right. If not, we can move on. I believe that brings us to recommendations for future meetings. Any recommendations? All right, seeing none. I will note that there are no committee meetings in July, so our next Policy and Government Relations Committee meeting will be Monday, August 11th, here in the boardroom at the Blair Administration Building. And with that, I bid you all good evening, and the meeting's adjourned.